I'm talking to the man that was the first guy under 2 seconds. Is that right in terms of pit stops, Kenny?
Yes, in 2012.
And what was the actual time?
1.92, I believe.
Can you just describe that pit stop in a few words in terms of the choreography and other teams doing a 2.3, 2.4? What was that edge?
I think we just created more robust procedures. Everybody knew exactly what, and everybody obviously does know what they need to do, but I think we just concentrated on their core jobs that they need to do. And it's just practice, and with the way that the car stopped, the way that, we released the car, etc. Wheel nuts are coming off before the car stopped, so the guys are reaching out here and that's off before the car comes in, it's just on and off again. So it's just practice. It's not all about practice, because the other thing is that too much practice, people start to switch off and you can then injure people. And sometimes if you give the guys a goal when you're practicing, it's like, hey guys, if you can do 3 stops at 2.2, we're done. We're not going to do 50 pit stops and all you be tired and bored and thinking, when the hell is this going to finish? Because I actually should be building my car now and it's taking time out of my day. So mechanics always found it to be, a bit of a ball ache pit stop practice. But I think in the end, they got really psyched up about being able to have the opportunity to go out and just hit it and get it done and go back to work.
I'm assuming the key to that perfect pit stop are the 4 guys with the guns getting it absolutely perfect on all 4 corners, right? If one of those is slightly out, then the whole pit stop's out of skew. Is that the actual pivotal essence?
No, it's not. It's the car's got to come up. The car's got to come up stopping in the right place is key. And that's why we've got boards and etc. You can't have one key thing. It all has to come together. The wheels need to come off in time. They, not jamming, because we know that happens, and through temperatures, etc. And come off and put on just equally perfectly as a car goes up and goes down perfectly, and then the driver reaction. I don't think you can. It's 22 people being perfect.
How did you select which guys put the guns in, which guys took the wheel off, put the wheel on? How did that work out? Did the jacks?
We practice. You practice when new guys come on. You speak to them and say, hey, look, how do you feel about, perhaps doing a gun, or do you want to, what have you done in your previous life, in pit stops with the other teams? Have you always been a front jack man, for instance, etc. And it's a conversation, and then it's practice, and see if they make the grade. Because someone could say, yeah, I used to do this in F2. I was a gunman and I was the best around, and then simply when they come to F1, it's a totally different ball game. Our guns are heavily blueprinted. They're much more powerful. We use carbon fiber vanes, etc., all sorts of other things. It's practice and see if they get within the time that's required.
And if you are a wheel-on guy, do you tend to stay as a wheel-on guy throughout your career, or do you move people around?
More likely to stay where you are, because there's also a comfort zone for those guys as well, because you have to think about what they go through. And if they're quick and are comfortable doing it, why change them? Unless you need to. I think we'd probably normally, if we lost somebody that left or whatever, I think whoever replaces them, we try and straight away put them into that role. But I think everybody can deal with it differently.
Okay, so you did that, and now you're in California and you're watching Formula One, and there's a new era now. We're in 18-inch wheels. Could you give us some feel of what that adaptation would have been like? Because that would have been, I guess, a pretty big change for everybody involved in the pit stops.
Yeah, it's huge. The diameter and the drum size will be different on the internal. I've noticed with the aero disc on the outside, I watched on the TV the guy taking out the rack, because the drum extrudes quite a lot. The top lip, you've only got a very small amount of area where he can lift it. So that must automatically, just getting it out to the car, in my eyes, would it feels like that would be awkward, and then you've got to put it down in the right place, turn it around, and orchestrate it how you used to. But obviously, the weight makes a huge difference too. You know, you're taking them off racks, and you have to move quickly because, you know, sometimes you get very late calls, and to have something that's now, I think, is 8 kilos heavier than it was before. From a percentage point of view, it's a lot. It doesn't sound like 8 kilos is a lot, but from an overall percentage, it's going to be high. Yeah, it's going to be different. But I think you can see how some of the pit stops now are almost back to the end of last year, 2.3s, and you know, they're not quite there yet, but then their procedure changed in Hungary last year to slow them down as well. So I think you have to take that into consideration.
Yeah, I mean, to the layman, it's absolutely staggering how well they've adapted and how that has happened. Do you imagine they've had to increase the physical training side of it because of the weight?
I mean, most of these guys, you'd be surprised to know, most of them are almost like athletes anyway. I mean, for years now, they run the track after, you know, when they finish work and built the car. They might be doing some slightly heavier weights. They might have changed some of their gym procedures for some people. But these guys are extremely fit guys. Not like when back in the days, in the 90s, when I was doing it.
We do see a few more glitches in a couple of pit stops, which is totally acceptable. But you've raised the point of the aero cover, and it's difficult to imagine now how they can be so accurate with the front guns with that different look. But obviously they're focusing on this absolute center point of the wheel, right, as the car's just coming up to the stopping point.
Yeah, I noticed on, I think it was the Alfa Tauri, they've got and I've not looked at many others, some of them are just complete carbon, but they've got a ring round just where the nut goes. So that's also a good, you know, line of sight for the gunman too. So I don't know if they've done that from a livery point of view, or in my eyes, I'd have probably put a day glow stick on there or some sort of day glow to try and, you know, make it more of a target, make it a bit more line of sight for the gunman.
Kenny, is it still possible to cross thread with the nut embedded in the wheel rim as it is these days? Shouldn't
be. I mean, there was, and years ago, I remember working with a great engineer, Dave Wass, who was actually the W in Arrows. You may know of him.
Yeah, I know Dave, yeah.
Yeah, he had this procedure where he had an axle and the wheel nut, and he'd wind it on, then wind it off, then he'd pull it out and go rotate it backwards, and then try and if you can't get it done, if you can't cross thread it with your hand, you shouldn't be able to get it cross threaded any time. So that's what I learned from them. But there's the other thing you got to think about is material changes and temperature changes between the axle and nuts. The nuts aluminium or steel axles, and tolerances when things get hot, and that's, I think, can be quite a challenge where people, teams might have to look at their tolerances on things.
And what was your backup gun procedure, and what is the backup gun procedure on the assumption that guns fail, correct? How many backups do you have?
You have one more backup.
Per wheel?
Per wheel, so you get 2 guns per wheel total. So and you rotate those as well, and these things are regularly serviced as well. Do
you practice? Presumably, you practice a gun failure and a backup gun coming into use,
yep.
Right?
We try and practice almost every thinkable scenario you can think of. When you come in with a flat tire and you try and jack the car up, for instance, then you on the opposite side of the car, at the rear, you try and tip it so it squares it up, etc. And these are essential values to have, and knowing all those procedures and coming up with any type of scenario can. And sometimes I remember back in the days where we had problems with our fuel flap and stuff, and we had to kick it off a few times and stuff like that, which sometimes you simply have to react and maybe perhaps cutting off a barge board during the race because it was damaged and floating around. That's just going back to old school, just get in there and get it done.
But you make a good point about the jacks, because I guess it's another area that we don't talk about very much, but the cars are just getting heavier every year. And I guess that you're having to develop the jacks all the time, and the balance point and how quickly you can get them up and down is going to be something. It's an ongoing program, I would guess.
Yeah, I haven't looked to see this year if they've changed the jacks much, but yeah, it's definitely, that's something that should be considered. They were quite heavy anyway, because it's just a manual jack, right? You're not allowed anything in the regulations. So I think, it is a challenge. I know we always had the biggest person we possibly could on the rear, which I think is Olaf at Red Bull.
How much does a jack typically weigh? I mean, there's a lot of carbon in there, right?
Currently, I don't know, because it's such a long time ago now, and I don't know what they've changed. You always make them as light as possible and as strong as possible, but they're liftable. They're light. Because you have to lift them in and throw them in sometimes, and you have a spare jack man for the front and rear as well. So if there's some reason, he'll just run back and you'll go straight in with the next one if you have a jack failure, for instance. So you have to think about jack failures.
And obviously stopping perfectly is key to a perfect pit stop. How much do the drivers need to practice that, and what are the keys to that? And are some drivers just naturally better at it than others?
Michael was better. I remember Michael Schumacher was, he knew the advantage that you can get by stopping in the right place and having a faster pit stop. So the drivers know that. They practice it through the weekend. As you see before, sometimes they go into the box garage area. They're told to come in and stop on the line. So they practice it as well. So it is critical. If they stop in the wrong place, actually too short is worse than being too long, because then you have to move everything to the wrong side of you to then perform. And rather than if it's a bit longer, you can hang in there a bit longer because you've already taken the wheel off. So moving a little bit further down, but it still hampers you a lot,
What about the driver who comes in a little bit slower than the other driver because he wants to get it absolutely right? Is the pace at which you come in affected as well?
I think the faster you can come in and stop on the marks is always going to be better. So I think it's all about getting that in and out speed, whole pit lane timing basically.
And how easy or difficult is it to simulate that in the race shop when you're doing your practice in the electric car? In terms of the pace at which, the exact speed at which you're coming in, and the floor you've got there, and the heat involved with a real pit stop, how do you simulate all that?
We can't with the heat, for instance. That's something we can't do. Although we can use heated up wheels and tyres on a cold axle, but not really that sort of beneficial. As for driving in, obviously we had a very painted immaculate floor, and we'd put down grip tape to simulate what a pit lane would be. But that's why the drivers have to practice over the weekend, because there's different surfaces of pit lane. Some are concrete, some are tarmac.
Wow, that's amazing, Kenny. Thanks for all that insight. How's your life now, by the way?
I live in California.
Tell us where you are.
I'm actually in Los Gatos, which is about 50 minutes south of San Francisco. It's about an hour away from Monterey and Carmel, which I'm sure you're very aware of this area. I'm currently doing quite a lot of travel. I've been in actually Miami a couple of weeks ago, and Houston, and this week I'm in Chicago and Michigan, and next week I'm doing a tour in California and Seattle and a few others. So I'm kind of still doing quite a bit of travel, which I tried to stop, but I think I'm having a pretty good time, to be honest. So I can't complain.
Have you got much memorabilia, Kenny, from your career?
Yeah, I've got some stuff. I've got some watches from Michael, some special engraved watches with different faces, the tag and Omega, which are engraved in numbers. I've got another great, lovely gift from Mark Webber, which is a tag Monaco after he won Monaco in 2010, and he had 15 of them made, and that's engraved 2010 winner, so that's quite nice, and I wear that a lot, but I've never worn a Michael Schumacher ones. But yeah, I've got stuff around. I've got Michael Schumacher visor there. I've got Fernando Alonso bottle up there, which was his first win in Hungary, and I said I was his number one at the time,
Brilliant.
and I said, "Can I have a champagne bottle?" He's like, "Yeah, no problem." I said, "Well, can you just sign it and put Hungary first win?" So I've got that in a case up there. I've got all sorts of signed stuff.
Nice.
You know, and some of my favourite ones are like pictures of me and Murray Walker together and stuff like that. You know, they're not all drivers. They're about you get to meet some amazing people in Formula One, and they're not all necessarily drivers. In fact, some of the drivers are the worst.
What's that photograph there next to the Total?
That's me in the workshop firing up the car. So you can see that's getting ready to, first fire up. So we've got all the engineers there and hydraulics people, and there's me with looking like I've got a great lump of attitude there. So